So you were here right at the really key points of the Vietnam War, and it was escalating.
It was.
Just when Johnson sort of got, if you were said 66.
Yeah, so 66 is when I was in kindergarten at Marcy's school. So so I remember most of the things about the horrible protests and the tear gas and all those protests were really something that I experienced as a little child, knowing that Daddy was walking through it to come home from the university, walking through the protests. And our parents tried to tell us everything's okay, but Daddy would sometimes come home with tears streaming from the tear gas. And as a little girl, you'd say, "Mama, is it okay for Daddy to come home?" And yeah, Daddy's okay, everything is fine. But it was really something that, as a little child, that you saw on a tangential basis. We did come to some of the Red Barn protests as a little child. Our parents took us to those things and explained that this was changing the nature of our neighborhood and that we needed to stick up for our neighborhood being really a neighborhood, not being full of big chain stores. And
so it wasn't about Vietnam, it was
well,
anti-war.
Well, it was. Well, there were certainly anti-war there were anti-war protests, and that was one thing. But that I didn't get invited to because they didn't want their little kids to be tear gassed. We were at very tame anti-war presentations.
I mean, with Dinkytown and Red Barn, it was a combination of the
Was
two.
that a combination? See, I didn't even realize what all of that was. I thought it was
right at the Kent State.
Is
so
that what?
You were just getting out of high school at that.
No, in '79.
Oh, 79. No, you were already.
So I was already in high school.
That was long ago.
So it was that was when I was in grade school and didn't really understand what it was all about. I knew that they were part of the Red Barn protests, weren't they? Wasn't that about fast food stuff?
Just what you said.
Right. So that was one thing, but certainly the anti-war protests and the civil rights marches, those were ones where we would go march with our parents too. But those, they were very careful that those were expected to be very tame ones before the little kids were pushed. You know, my sisters and I were there. My sister might have been in a stroller, but we were very careful, or my parents were careful that I never saw any of the tear gas. I only, after the Kent State, I don't know what you call it, Kent State disaster happened. Massacre is the word. Yes, after the Kent State massacre, and the protests got more violent. The only way I experienced that was by seeing snatches on TV when you came into the TV room too late. But mostly by seeing Daddy come home with tears streaming down his face because he'd been gassed. Just a professor walking home from, well, maybe he was protesting, I don't know. I was little. But